Have you ever stopped to think about the orders that God gave to his prophet? Today, we're going to discover a surprising story from the Bible that will leave your jaw dropping. Imagine God instructing a prophet to marry not a noble woman from high society, someone of unblemished prestige, but a prostitute. Yes, you heard that right. This happened, and in the story we will try to understand, why did God unite the prophet Hosea and a prostitute? In a period of prosperity and moral decay in Israel, a time when the people enjoyed peace, but at the same time were immersed in corruption and morally questionable practices. And it is in this tense scenario that God calls Hosea, a courageous and obedient prophet, surprised by a divine order that would change not only his life, but the way we understand the relationship between God and his people. Imagine the situation: Hosea, a man of God, receiving the divine order to marry someone known for his life as a prostitute. What does that mean? Why would God make such a shocking decision? Prepare to discover the deep meaning behind this divine instruction and how it unfolds in Hosea's life. And before you think this is just another biblical story, I want to challenge you to stay until the end of the video. I guarantee that, by understanding the purpose behind this unusual wedding, your perception of God's faithfulness will be transformed. So, grab your favorite drink, adjust your chair, because the story of Hosea will amaze and inspire you like never before. God chose Hosea for a mission that would challenge not only the society of the time, but also the expectations of the prophet himself. Hosea's, a pious man, being called by God to accomplish something that would become one of the most remarkable in biblical history. God did not ask Hosea to prophesy or perform an extraordinary miracle. No, he asked for something personal, something that would go directly to Hosea's heart. The order? Marry a prostitute.
And the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take a woman of prostitutions, and you shall have children by prostitution, because the land has been a prostitute, going away from the Lord.
Not only would this challenge social norms, but it would also plunge Hosea into a journey of pain, sacrifice, and, most of all, unconditional love. Hosea's marriage was not just a public act of obedience, but a living representation of Israel's relationship with God at that time. Every detail of this wedding carried deep symbolism, a mirror of the spiritual infidelity of the people of Israel, who, despite material prosperity, were giving their hearts to idols and reprehensible practices. Imagine Hosea's anguish when following divine order. He not only witnessed the life of the woman he chose as his wife, but felt the betrayal and emotional pain firsthand. Every step of this story was a representation of God's own heartbreak over Israel's unfaithfulness. Hosea was not just a prophet. He was a living witness of God's love being trampled upon. To understand the nature of divine order for Hosea is to delve into the depths of God's love, which goes beyond human understanding. This marriage, despite its complexities and challenges, was a crucial piece in the narrative God was weaving to show his patience, compassion, and desire for reconciliation, even in the face of blatant infidelity. The plot intensifies when Hosea and Gomer begin to form a family. But it's not just common names here. They are prophetic names, chosen by God to convey a direct message to the people of Israel. Each name is like a sentence that resonates with deep and impactful meanings. Jeziel, Lo-Ramah, and Lo-Ami. The first son, Jeziel, whose name in Hebrew indicates God scatters, was a clear prophecy of God's future judgments on Israel. But the message doesn't stop there. The second son, Lo-Ramah, meaning lack of mercy, echoes God's decision not to show compassion to the house of Israel. And the third son, Lo-Ami, which translates to not my people, is a profound cry from God, indicating Israel's turning away from his protection and favor. Each name is like a brushstroke on a prophetic canvas. Visualize Jeziel, Lo-Ramah, and Lo-Ami as visual symbols of impending judgment, lack of mercy, and separation from God. This is the artistic language that God chose to communicate, using the life of Hosea and his family as a living painting to convey his message. In addition to the names, it is important to understand that each child, each birth, was a living experience of the judgment and affliction that God was announcing. Hosea's family became more than a domestic unit. It was a profound narrative, a reenactment of the tumultuous relationship between God and Israel. These names, these lives, were messages rooted in the heart of sacred history. Through Hosea's family, God was crying out to Israel, using language so visceral and symbolic that it could not be ignored. It was as if he said,
"Look at Hosea, at his family. See the consequence of infidelity. Feel the weight of imminent judgment. This is the reality you are choosing."
The story of Hosea is not just an ancient chapter in the Bible, it is a timeless lesson about the consequences of human choice and the profound relationship between God and his people. Prophetic names are not just words, they are a promise of restoration despite the apparent darkness. We then arrive at a crucial chapter in the story, Gomer's life after his marriage to Hosea. She is not just a secondary character, but a figure who embodies the persistent nature of human infidelity. Gomer, initially chosen by Hosea, finds herself on a turbulent journey of ups and downs. Gomer, Hosea's wife, faced a chronic condition of infidelity. Her heart seemed unable to resist the temptation to return to prostitution, even after the unique experience of being chosen by a prophet of God. This turn of events makes us question, what led Gomer back to such a destructive lifestyle? Was it boredom, negligence, or necessity? The adversities that Gomer faced were great enough to take her back to a past that, initially, seemed to be overcome. Gomer's attitude of returning to prostitution leads us to understand the complexities of human nature and how, even after transformative experiences, we can lose ourselves. But Gomer's story does not end in the darkness of infidelity. Amid the shadows, something surprising happened. Gomer, in a moment of clarity, recognizes that things were better when she was with Hosea. At this crucial point, we see the seed of redemption being planted, the choice to return to something that has already been lost. Gomer, facing the consequences of her choices, makes the decision to return to her husband. She admits that things were better when she was under Hosea's care. This twist not only reveals human vulnerability, but also points to the ability to choose redemption, even when it seems too late. And here, dear viewer, we cannot help but see the parallels between Gomer's journey and our own spiritual journey. How many times have we chosen destructive paths, only to realize, in a moment of clarity, that true wholeness is in the presence of God? Gomer's story is a call to reflect on our own choices and the search for redemption. Before we go any further, I want you to think about times when you may have strayed from what is truly meaningful in your life. Are there areas where you need to make the decision to return, just like Gomer? Her story is a lesson for all of us, and redemption is always within reach of those who choose to seek it. Gomer is not just a secondary character, it is a catalyst for deeper revelation. Stay with me, because what's coming is even more surprising and relevant to our own journeys of redemption. Now that we have witnessed the ups and downs of the lives of Hosea and Gomer, it is time to understand the theology behind this remarkable story. The relationship between Hosea and Gomer goes beyond a personal drama. It is a powerful metaphor for the relationship between God and Israel. Here, every choice, every pain, every twist is a mirror of the tumultuous relationship between the chosen people and their Creator. The central metaphor that permeates the story of Hosea is Israel's spiritual adultery. Just as a broken marriage involves the introduction of a third person, Israel's idolatry and spiritual infidelity are represented by idol worship. Hosea, by living this painful reality, becomes a living testimony of God's deep regret at the infidelity of his people. And this is not the first time this metaphor has been used in the Bible. Throughout the canon, we find examples of God comparing his relationship with his people to a marriage. Jeremiah was instructed not to marry to understand the emptiness God felt when Israel walked away. Ezekiel, through the loss of his wife, conveyed God's anguish at infidelity. The metaphor of marriage is a vivid, emotional language used by God to communicate his intimate relationship with his people. This metaphor goes back to the institution of marriage itself, as recorded in Genesis 2 verse 24. Marriage, originally designated by God as an intimate and faithful union, becomes the basis for understanding the relationship between him and Israel. And just like a spouse breaking their binding vows, Israel, by turning away from God, broke the established covenant. In the theocracy of Israel, the penalty for adultery was severe, as set forth in Leviticus 20 verse 10. Equal punishment for both men and women emphasizes the seriousness of the relationship between God and his people. Spiritual adultery, therefore, was not just an individual choice, but a collective betrayal. The story of Hosea is not just a narrative of judgment and punishment. It is a message of warning, but also of hope. Even in the promises of judgment, there is the promise of restoration, as in Hosea 1 verse 10 and 11, where God promises that the children of Israel would be as numerous as the sands of the sea, called children of the living God. The marriage metaphor, despite its sadness, paves the way for glorious restoration. So as we contemplate the metaphor of marriage in the story of Hosea, I invite you to reflect on your own relationship with God. Where have we been unfaithful? Where do we break our vows of commitment? And, most importantly, how can we, like Israel, seek restoration and reconciliation? The story of Hosea is a call to a deep, intimate, and, above all, faithful relationship with our Creator. As we navigate the challenges of Hosea's story, we cannot ignore the profound promises of restoration that God makes to his people. Through the prophet, God not only warns, but also extends the hand of redemption, promising a renewed future for Israel. It is a divine touch of hope amidst the darkness of infidelity. Let's go straight to the sources, and God's words recorded in Hosea 2 verses 19 to 20.
I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness, in judgment, in kindness, and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you will know the Lord.
These words are more than a promise. They are a divine commitment to love, justice, and mercy. And if you think this promise is unique to the Old Testament, think again. Let's take a leap to the New Testament, where we find vivid examples of forgiveness and reconciliation. Remember the sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet? Even in the face of her transgressions, Jesus not only forgave her, but restored her. A clear example of how the promise of restoration echoes through the centuries. By connecting the dots between the two testaments, we see that the promise of restoration is not just an ancient formula, but an eternal truth. Just as Hosea represents the redemption of Israel through marriage, Jesus, in the New Testament, personifies spiritual redemption, offering forgiveness and restoration to all who come to him with a contrite heart. These stories, separated by centuries, echo a clear message. No matter how far we have come, no matter the consequences of our choices, there is hope for restoration. God not only forgives, but desires to marry us again in justice, judgment, kindness, mercies, and faithfulness. As we explore these promises of restoration, I invite you to consider where you need this redemption in your own life. Just as Israel was promised to be betrothed again by God, you too have the opportunity to experience God's restoring grace. The story of Hosea is an invitation to all of us to accept this redemption. Wow, what a moving video through the story of Hosea. We witness choices, infidelities, promises of restoration. This story is more than an ancient tale. It's a living narrative that resonates with our own spiritual journeys. Reflect on what this story means to you. How does Israel's spiritual unfaithfulness relate to her own choices? Where do you find hope in the promises of restoration? This is an opportunity to look within and allow Hosea's story to touch deeply on your own journey. God's promises are timeless, and the redemption he offers transcends time. Hosea reminds us that, even in the midst of infidelity, God is willing to restore, redeem, and marry again. If this story spoke to your heart, if you felt the need for redemption and restoration in your own spiritual life, I want to encourage you to make a decision today. God is ready to write a new page in your history, just as he did with Israel and as he did with so many throughout history. And here is the final invitation. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next profound narratives from the Bible. Share this video with those who need to hear this message of hope and redemption. And, of course, leave your comment below sharing how Hosea's story impacted you. So, don't just watch passively, but actively participate in this spiritual journey. Because just as Hosea experienced pain, redemption, and the promise of a renewed future, we can also find that same hope in our own lives. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me, and I can't wait to explore more together. To the next.